All right, welcome back to the second week of the jury selection in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin resumes today. A live look for you right now. Less than 2 hours ago, or I guess less than an hour ago, Derek Chauvin's defense attorney Eric Nelson, this is not the man you see on the screen right now, though, did ask the court to delay Chauvin's criminal trial, that or re-question jurors in the wake of this $27 million civil settlement between Minneapolis and George Floyd's attorney. Nelson told the judge, quote, he is gravely concerned by the announcement, calling it incredibly prejudicial. Attorneys began their search for 7 more jurors today. Both sides are struggling, though, to find additional jurors, as many express concerns about potentially serving on a jury in such a high-profile case. Many are worried about violence after the verdict comes down as well. Now, the $27 million settlement was unanimously approved by Minneapolis' City Council for the family of George Floyd back on Friday. According to the family's lawyer, this was the largest pretrial settlement in a wrongful death case ever. So I don't think that would have any impact on prospective jurors, would it? Yes, of course it would. Let's talk more about this now with the host of the Dan O'Donnell Show. Catch them weekdays from 9 to 11 a.m. on News Talk 1130 in Milwaukee. Also back with us, Ari Hoffman, associate editor at the Post Millennial and host of the Canary in a Coal Mine podcast. And Isabel Brown from Turning Point USA is here. She is a Gen Z conservative activist, and she's got a great book as well, which you see on the screen, called Front Lines. All right, let's start with you, Dan. Let's dig into your legal background a little bit. I can't think of anything that would be more prejudicial than a settlement of $27 million coming out basically saying that Derek Chauvin is responsible for what happened in some way, if not the city of Minneapolis, for employing him. I mean, how in the world is there going to be any presumption of innocence before this trial actually starts?
The reality is there can't be, for exactly the reason that you stated, John. The city of Minneapolis has just said, we believe that Derek Chauvin is responsible for the death of George Floyd. Now, there's a different standard, obviously, in a civil trial. Had this gone to trial, it doesn't need to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But when the city of Minneapolis is already saying that Chauvin is responsible for the death of George Floyd, and the question before jurors is Derek Chauvin responsible for the death of George Floyd? There's no way that you can go into that impartially when the city government, the unanimous declaration of all city council members, said, yes, he was responsible. This is horrible timing. And I believe that announcing it right now was, in fact, designed to influence prospective jurors.
Well, I can't see how that would be helpful, and you can't put a price on anyone's life here, but $27 million is a lot of money, Isabel, and that's the expectation now. Even higher, I think the expectations now are for a murder conviction. We saw last week with the judge putting this third-degree charge back in the case, which maybe gives the prosecutors a little bit of a wiggle room here. But again, you have a scenario where you set the community up for a bait-and-switch type situation where they overcharge these crimes. The prosecutors have a difficult time delivering on that because of the evidence in these cases, because it's very difficult to prove, even with the video here. So many people are concerned about the prospect of violence. You're seeing news reports about what right does the media have, Isabel, to cover this type of stuff. It's like we know whatever happens in this case, there's going to be riots in the streets after the verdict.
There absolutely is, John, and this is the most politically charged topic of our time. Truthfully, all of last year and now this year in 2021 as well, there's not a person alive in the United States or frankly around the world who has not at least heard of the George Floyd case. And therefore, this reminds me a lot of some other high-profile murder cases in our time where the entire world will be watching the verdict of this jury. Of course, they should not be blamed for fear of retaliation from that. But the city's announcement with this $27 million lawsuit is very suspicious timing indeed when it comes to trying to influence the opinions of the members of the jury in particular. One of my favorite books in the world is To Kill a Mockingbird. The reason I love this book is because Atticus Finch took on a case that it didn't matter if his client was innocent or guilty. He was already guilty in the court of public opinion, regardless of what the facts of the case might have looked like. I think that's very much mirroring what we're seeing with this particular case today, and I'm anxious to see what the jury selection process is going to look like as we continue this trial today.
All right, and next to me here, you can see Andrew Cuomo is speaking, getting a round of applause. They're not too concerned about social distancing right now, but he's talking about vaccine distribution in New York. We are waiting to see if he takes questions, and we may go there. But Ari, you see what's happening with the situation It looks like they're not going to take questions. That's over now. So let's just focus on this here. You know, it's interesting. Isabel mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know how many school districts now actually allow their kids to read that, but that's why we all read this. I think growing up, probably everyone on this panel had that kind of education, which that was still required reading once upon a time. But when you look at this situation in Minneapolis, you see what else is happening in other cities. In Portland, for example, Ted Wheeler now seeking to boost police funding, asking the city council for $2 million in order to curb the violence consuming that city. When you try to defund the police in the wake of something like this, when you try to make these emotional decisions, Ted Wheeler tried to kowtow to the angry mob in his city. This is what happens. You eventually have to replace it with more police and more money to solve the problem that you helped create.
Well, it's even worse than that. You're talking about Portland, Oregon, which had 1 homicide in the same time period last year, has now had 20 for this year. Minneapolis defunded their entire their entire police department, and look what happened there. Now Seattle is looking at doubling down on dumb, and they're looking to defund the police department further when we had double the homicides as the previous year. This is going to continue. A settlement like this also emboldens criminals who say, oh, you know what, I can get the police to do something to me, and then the city will give me a huge fine. And to Isabel's point, I'm reminded of a joke that happened during the OJ trial where it was a knock-knock joke. Knock, knock, who's there? OJ Simpson. OJ who? Oh, you'd be perfect for the jury. How is this guy ever going to get a fair trial in the court of public opinion?
He's not. And again, you know, we've all seen what happened on video before, but the reason why these trials are held is because there is a presumption of innocence. We advocate for due process always, no matter what the circumstances are. And we advocate for due process when it comes to the accused in some of these sexual harassment cases as well. Governor Cuomo obviously under a lot of pressure. Let's talk about that a little bit. We can take a look at this kind of tale of two governors, guys. We have a couple minutes left here. We're going to talk about this more coming up in the next hour, but we're seeing a lot of contrast these days between Governor Cuomo in New York and Governor DeSantis down in Florida. Here is a media love fest that we saw recently. Of course, which governor would you rather have, right? The guy drinking beers or the guy huddled with a blanket with some other bottle in his left hand under the shawl? But, you know, even some of the media now are calling out their own for the love fest that they threw all over Andrew Cuomo. Take a look.
This has been a remarkable show of leadership by Governor Cuomo in recent days.
Governor Cuomo, I think, is one of the heroes on the front lines.
With all of this adulation that you're getting for doing your job, are you thinking about running for president?
Maybe Trump is just a little bit mad that Governor Cuomo has become a kind of acting president.
Dealing with hardship actually makes you stronger. That's what Governor Cuomo said earlier today. That's what I'm going to go teach my kids right now at home.
Well, dealing with hardship, I mean, he's got to be Superman at this point, doesn't he, Dan?
Yeah, I did.
And the kryptonite is that we know what the kryptonite is for Governor Cuomo.
Yeah, sadly we do. I did love Joy Reid in that montage saying that Andrew Cuomo is sort of like acting president. Well, we now know he was sort of like President Clinton. Unfortunately for him, it is embarrassing. And actually, Eric Wemple at the Washington Post did what I didn't think the Washington Post would ever do, and that's call out the double standards and call out the fawning coverage, saying it was an embarrassment for CNN to have Andrew Cuomo on his brother's primetime show for a comedy hour while people were literally dying in nursing homes because of the governor's failed policy. Let's never forget, and I'm not going to minimize or anything like that. I'm not going to minimize sexual harassment allegations, but the real scandal here is a literal life or death situation in which old people were sent to their deaths because of COVID positive patients going into nursing homes. That was a policy, and it was the most disastrous of the entire COVID-19 pandemic in New York State under Andrew Cuomo.
I saw another commentator over the weekend say on Twitter that basically everything that Ron DeSantis was accused of doing when it comes to COVID, Andrew Cuomo actually did with negative effect. And we'll talk more about that coming up in the next hour. We'll talk about Andrew Cuomo's vaccines are apparently doing some sort of loyalty test to public health officials in New York. So we'll talk more about that. We're also going to continue our discussion on Andrew Cuomo's future in the next hour.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.